My husband called me while I was away on business. I'm divorcing you, Sloane. I sold the apartment. I'm starting over with Lena. Enjoy finding a new place. He laughed, cruel and triumphant. For a split second, the world tilted beneath me. The home I built, the life I nurtured, reduced to a joke in his mouth. But as the line went dead, something inside me hardened into steel. He thought he had won. He thought I would beg. Instead, I whispered to myself, "Game on." And when I returned, his smirk would be the first casualty. When Derek and I first moved into the apartment, everyone said we were the perfect couple. The space gleamed with polished hardwood floors and windows that stretched wide enough to swallow the city skyline. He would hold my hand at parties, his smile sharp and rehearsed, while I laughed at his jokes and poured wine into crystal glasses for our friends. We were the picture of success. Derek had just closed another big real estate deal, and I was climbing higher in my marketing firm. To the world, we had it all. But the first cracks were never loud. They slid in quietly, disguised as concern. Derek kept every password to our accounts. "It's easier if one of us manages the finances," he'd said, handing me a small allowance each month as if I were a teenager. At first, I let it go. He was good with numbers, I told myself. But soon, I found myself needing to ask permission to buy a new dress for work or to send flowers to my mother. And whenever I questioned it, he tilted his head with that smirk and said, "You're too sensitive, Sloane. Don't overthink everything." Gaslighting. It wasn't a word I had used back then, but the sensation was already familiar. Every time I caught something off, Derek made me doubt my own perception. If I said I felt ignored, he told me I was imagining things. If I asked where he'd been late at night, he laughed, called me paranoid, and rolled over in bed. Gradually, my world shrank. The Saturday morning running group I'd joined after college faded away, one unanswered text after another, until they stopped inviting me. Derek had accidentally scheduled showings or family lunches at the same time. Visiting my mother became harder. Derek claimed we were too busy, that she drained me with her negativity, that I should focus on us instead. Soon, my calendar had no room for anyone but him. And yet, even then, I clung to the softer memories. Derek kneeling on our bare apartment floor with takeout cartons scattered around, feeding me dumplings with his fingers because we didn't own forks yet. Derek kissing my forehead after my first promotion, whispering, "You're unstoppable." I held those memories like talismans, convincing myself the man I loved still existed beneath the cold veneer. I wasn't ready to believe I had built a marriage on sand. The facade began to crumble the night I opened my inbox while traveling for a client meeting in Chicago. Nestled between receipts and company updates was a charge from a high-end restaurant back home. 2 entrees, a bottle of wine I'd never tasted, and dessert. The date? The same night I'd been eating room service soup alone in a hotel room. I stared at the bill until the numbers blurred. Derek had told me he was working late. Who had he been with instead? When I returned, I tucked the question inside my chest like a stone. He noticed nothing, or perhaps he didn't care. That was when I started writing things down. Tiny details at first. His tone, his absences, the way he flinched when I asked about money. Screenshots of bank statements. Photos of mail that came addressed to him, but with my name attached. One evening, curiosity turned to dread when I scrolled through our joint account and saw a large transfer marked Advance Disbursement. The funds had been moved to an LLC I didn't recognize. What froze me was the notation. My name listed as guarantor. I had never signed a thing. The unease became sharper days later when Derek parked his car beneath our building. As he stepped out, sunlight caught his windshield, and in that reflection I saw her. Dark hair, long nails tapping at her phone. Lena. The name clicked before I even admitted it to myself. I'd heard it once, whispered at a holiday party when Derek lingered too long by the bar. Now she was no rumor. She was flesh, bone, lipstick. That night, I opened my journal and wrote in block letters, "If I'm not crazy, I'll need proof." My hand shook as I underlined the words. For too long, I had accepted Derek's script, his narrative that I was fragile, needy, delusional. But I wasn't. The truth was louder now than his lies. A week later, the proof arrived, brutal and undeniable. Among the stack of papers Derek had tossed carelessly on the counter was a contract for the sale of our apartment. I reached for it, heart pounding. My eyes locked on the final page, where a signature curved in familiar strokes. It was my name, my handwriting. Except it wasn't. The letters were wrong, practiced but imperfect, like a mask that almost fit. Derek had forged my consent to sell the home I had built with him. The air left my lungs. My knees wobbled and I gripped the edge of the counter to keep from collapsing. I wasn't just fighting whispers of infidelity or secret dinners. I was staring at fraud, betrayal inked in my name. He wasn't just dismantling our marriage. He was erasing me from the life I had created. And in that moment, I understood. I had been asleep too long. Derek believed I would stay silent, that I would let him write me out of the story. But my silence had ended the moment I saw that signature. The night I discovered the forged contract, sleep became impossible. I lay in the dark, listening to Derek's even breathing beside me, and realized I was sharing a bed with a man who was already dismantling my life piece by piece. That was the night I decided to fight, not with screaming or begging, but with silence and precision. I bought a slim recording device the next morning, something small enough to slip into my blazer pocket without notice. Each time Derek called Lena, each time he made offhand remarks about money or whispered deals, I clicked it on. I stored every file in an encrypted folder, hidden behind layers of passwords. From there, I moved to my iCloud, pulling photos of receipts, emails, and even snapshots of documents Derek carelessly left on his desk. The building's hallway cameras became another ally. I requested clips under the guise of safety concerns and downloaded the moments he brought Lena upstairs. Every piece of evidence had its place. I began numbering them, E1 through E27, carefully logging dates and details into a timeline. Each entry told a story. Derek withdrawing funds, Derek signing papers, Derek laughing with Lena as they crossed the lobby. My apartment became less a home and more a war room covered in sticky notes and binders. It wasn't just about betrayal. As I pieced the puzzle together, I saw his hunger clearly. Derek wasn't satisfied with real estate commissions anymore. He was funneling money through shell companies, dressing up transfers with terms like consulting fees. The LLC, the one that bore my forged signature, wasn't just a trick to sell our apartment. It was part of something larger, dirtier, designed to wash money into clean accounts. Derek's greed had grown so swollen it no longer fit behind his polished smile. Lena's role was obvious. She wasn't just the mistress, she was demanding to be displayed, to take my place publicly. Her envy seeped into every dinner charge and hotel booking. She wanted Derek to humiliate me, to prove I had been replaced. And then there was Vivian, my mother-in-law, who draped herself in pearls and whispered in charity circles. Her obsession with reputation made her a silent accomplice. Better to preserve appearances than admit her son was a liar. Late one evening, as I organized receipts, I paused over a new bank statement. There it was, a transfer of $85,000 from Derek's LLC directly into Lena's account. The memo line read simply, "Consulting." My pulse thudded in my ears. Consulting what? Her beauty regimen? Her social calendar? Proof didn't get cleaner than that. I slid the page into a plastic sleeve, labeled it E28, and locked it in my growing binder. But evidence wasn't enough. I needed allies. That's when I called Amaya Chin, a lawyer known for being sharp as glass. I laid the binder on her desk, hands trembling. She flipped through the documents with calm efficiency, raising her brows only once, at my forged signature. "This is strong," she said finally, snapping the binder shut. "But don't tip your hand, not yet. We'll file for a temporary freeze on assets when the moment's right. Until then, keep collecting." Her words steadied me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. Next came financial counsel. I arranged a discreet meeting with a specialist who helped me siphon part of my salary into a separate account. We set up a P.O. box so Derek's eyes never touched the statements. Each quiet step was like reclaiming oxygen I hadn't realized I'd lost. And then there was Noah. my oldest friend, now working as a private investigator. He didn't need convincing. I never trusted him, Noah muttered after hearing my story. Let me dig. Within days, he returned with a file that made my blood run cold. Lena had once been arrested for fraud in another state, given probation and a suspended sentence. She wasn't just a mistress. She was a con artist. Derek hadn't replaced me with love. He had replaced me with a liability. For the first time in weeks, I laughed, short, sharp, bitter. The irony was almost beautiful. Derek's greed had blinded him to the obvious. Lena was the kind of partner who would destroy him faster than I ever could. Still, beneath the triumph, a sliver of grief lingered. That night, I went to my mother's small house for dinner. She served roast chicken, the same meal she'd made every birthday of my childhood. Between bites, she pressed a silver bracelet into my hand. "So you remember who you are," she said softly. I blinked back tears. It was a pause in the chaos, a reminder that I was more than a victim, more than a strategist. I was still Sloane, her daughter. Driving home, my phone buzzed with a message from Noah. Lena just bought a ticket. Destination, your city. The same one with the apartment. The screen glowed in the dark car, and I felt my grip tighten on the wheel. She was coming closer, stepping right into the life she thought was hers. And she had no idea I was waiting. When I returned home after meeting Noah and reading his message about Lena's ticket, I slipped into the role I'd been rehearsing for weeks, the dutiful wife. Derek was in the kitchen, leaning over his laptop, muttering to himself about projections and returns. He looked up, his face bright with a salesman's grin. "Big things, Sloane," he said, tapping the screen like a magician revealing his final trick. "We're on the edge of a deal that will change everything. Luxury condos, overseas investors. It's our ticket out of the small leagues." I forced my lips into a smile, the kind of smile I used to give when I believed him. "That sounds exciting," I murmured, setting my bag down. My fingers itched to grab the binder hidden in my office closet, to slam it in front of him and watch the color drain from his face. But not yet. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, smirked, then flipped its screen down on the counter. But in that brief flash, I saw it. Lena's name, bold against the glow. A single word followed. Tonight? The air burned in my chest. I wanted to scream, to rip the phone from his hand and shove the message in his smug face. But instead, I turned toward the stove, pretending to check the pot of soup I had set earlier. My hands gripped the spoon so tightly the wood creaked. I inhaled slowly, exhaled even slower. Patience was not surrender. Patience was strategy. Later that night, when Derek fell asleep with his phone tucked under his pillow, I crept up to the building's rooftop. The city stretched before me, lights scattered like 1,000 secrets waiting to be uncovered. The cool night air pressed against my skin, anchoring me in my own body. I leaned on the railing, whispering into the dark, "I will win. Not by screaming, not by breaking. By law, by proof. By the truth he tried to erase." It was the promise that steadied me. The rage would not consume me. I wouldn't let him turn me into the kind of monster he already believed me to be. When I returned downstairs, my phone vibrated on the nightstand. A new message appeared, sent from an unknown number. "If you want to know whose name is on the debt, meet me tomorrow." 7:30. I stared at the words, my heart rattling against my ribs. Someone out there knew more than I did. Someone wanted to talk. The next morning, I carried myself through breakfast as if nothing had happened. Derek prattled on about potential investors, about how his name would be in magazines by the end of the year. I nodded in the right places, playing the part of the supportive wife. Inside, every word was being filed into the arsenal I was building. Hours later, I sat alone in a quiet cafe, the meeting place from the message. My coffee went cold before I saw her, Ari, Derek's sister-in-law. She had never hidden her disdain for me, dismissing me as too quiet, too fragile, too ordinary for her successful brother-in-law. Yet here she was, sliding into the chair across from me. I didn't think you'd come, I said carefully. Her eyes flicked to the window, then back to me. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small USB drive, setting it between us like an offering. I'm not here for you, she said flatly. I'm here for the truth. Derek's gone too far. She tapped the drive. We'll prove it. I didn't reach for it immediately. Why now? Aries' jaw tightened. Because his debt isn't just his anymore. He's dragged my husband's name into it. He forged more than your signature. He thinks family loyalty means silence. But loyalty has limits. I picked up the USB, feeling the weight of it despite its size. My pulse thundered. So you're choosing me? Her expression softened just slightly. I'm choosing justice, not you. Don't mistake it. As she rose to leave, I slipped the drive into my pocket. My mind raced, connecting dots. Derek's greed, Lena's jealousy, Vivian's obsession with appearances. Each one of them carried a weakness, a flaw. If I wanted to take them down, I had to strike where it hurt most. Derek worshipped his reputation. If the investors learned he was funneling money illegally, his empire would collapse. Lena wanted status to flaunt her conquest, but her criminal record was a weapon waiting to be unsheathed. Vivian feared shame more than truth. If society saw her family as scandalous, her pearl-draped facade would shatter. On my walk back, I whispered under my breath, reputation, legality, exposure, shame. That's the net. And they've already stepped inside it. At home, Derek greeted me with another empty grin, oblivious. He poured himself a glass of wine, humming, convinced he was untouchable. But I knew better. The cracks had widened, the ground beneath him had begun to shift. And now I had Ari's drive, a key to unlock doors Derek thought were forever closed. You might think I was ready to explode then, to end it all in one swift move. But no. That wasn't patience. That wasn't art. The time hadn't come, yet. The USB from Ari was the crack in the dam I'd been waiting for. That night, she came by my apartment, her face pale but resolute, and slid a folder across my kitchen counter. He's moving everything, she whispered. Tomorrow, he plans to pull every dollar from the joint account and roll it into Lena's project. If you don't act now, there'll be nothing left. I stared at the documents, printouts of emails, screenshots of transfers, even an outline of a new property deal Lena was fronting. The numbers were staggering. Derek wasn't just reckless, he was preparing to bury us both. By dawn, I was sitting in Amaya Chen's office, the binder open before her, Ari's USB loaded onto her laptop. Amaya leaned back, fingers steepled, her gaze sharp and calculating. This is enough, she said finally. We'll file for an emergency freeze on assets and submit your divorce petition today. We'll include adultery, fraud, and forgery. The judge won't ignore this. My signature on the documents trembled slightly, not from fear, but from release. For weeks, I had been gathering, waiting, suffocating beneath his lies. Now I was done being his silent shadow. I was stepping into the light with proof. Before leaving Amaya's office, I paused in the restroom. The mirror reflected a face I almost didn't recognize. Dark circles beneath my eyes, lips pressed tight, hair unkempt. But when I lifted my chin, I saw more than weariness. I saw steel. I saw a woman who had loved deeply and been betrayed, but who refused to be destroyed. You still know how to love, I murmured to my reflection. But you also know how to fight. That night, Derek dressed with unusual care, a new tie, cufflinks glinting, cologne heavy in the air. Big dinner, he said casually. Time to celebrate the next chapter. I knew what he meant. He was going to unveil Lena to let the world see his upgrade. My stomach churned, but I kept my smile steady. As he slipped his phone into his pocket, it buzzed. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and froze. A court notification lit up his display. Order granted. Temporary freeze on all Caldwell assets. Divorce proceedings initiated. His eyes darted to me. What the hell is this? He demanded, voice sharp. I tilted my head, calm, controlled. Paperwork, I said simply, then walked past him. Inside, my pulse pounded like war drums. The next morning, Derek's empire began to crumble. Calls poured in from his bank, his investors, his accountant. His accounts were locked, his liquidity gone. When he tried to reassure his business partners, they turned cold. Within 48 hours, two of his largest investors demanded a full audit of his LLC. Meanwhile, I sent carefully prepared packets to two of Derek's most powerful associates, executives who prided themselves on discretion and legality. Inside, I placed summaries of evidence: the forged contract, Lena's criminal record, the suspicious transfers. My cover letter was professional, detached, and devastatingly factual. I didn't need to embellish. The truth was enough to poison Derek's credibility. By the weekend, the rumors had begun. Derek Caldwell wasn't the golden boy of real estate anymore. He was unstable, desperate, maybe even criminal. His project with Lena suddenly looked toxic. The phone calls from Vivian started soon after. She screeched into the receiver, demanding explanations. "How dare you humiliate this family?" she cried. "Do you have any idea what you've done to our name?" I almost laughed, but I let her talk, recording every word. And then, in her fury, she slipped. "We agreed Derek would sell the apartment quietly. No one had to know if you'd just behaved." My blood ran cold. She knew. She had known all along. Her obsession with keeping up appearances had made her an accomplice. I said nothing, only thanked her for her concern, and hung up. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. You might think this was the climax, that Derek had already lost. But the truth was, we had only just begun. His rage was only starting to boil, his desperation only beginning to surface. I had cut off his money, wounded his pride, exposed his lies. But he was still dangerous. That truth arrived in the form of an envelope delivered to Amaya's office. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small object. The note was typed, short and venomous. "Stop, or you'll regret it." Taped to the page was a copy of my apartment's spare key. When Amaya called to tell me, her voice was calm, but her words carried weight. "This isn't just financial anymore, Sloane. He's warning you. He wants you to feel unsafe." I gripped the phone, cold washing over me. Derek had lost control of the narrative, and when men like him lose control, they reach for whatever weapon is left. The anonymous threat with my spare key shifted the battlefield. Derek was cornered now, and cornered men lash out. Within days, the headlines began. Online gossip columns published anonymous quotes about me. Unstable, paranoid, destructive. Derek painted me as an unhinged wife who fabricated betrayal to cover her own failures. He didn't just want to win legally, he wanted to annihilate me socially. Then Lena stepped into the spotlight. Glossy articles appeared on lifestyle blogs, each portraying her as the supportive new partner who rescued Derek from a toxic marriage. One piece carried a headline so perverse I almost choked: "Victim of Financial Abuse. How Sloane Archer Controlled Derek Caldwell's Money." She had stolen my reality and stitched it onto herself like a mask. Vivian, of course, played her role. She hosted luncheons where my name dripped from pearl-painted lips, her voice sharp as she urged her circle to distance themselves from the scandal. By the time whispers reached me, I was already an outcast in rooms I'd once moved through with ease. Still, I held steady. Their noise didn't change the evidence in my binder, but fear crept into the edges of my nights. One evening, after bolting my door, I noticed fresh scratches around the lock. My breath caught. I called Amaya, who urged me to file immediately. Hands trembling, I signed the restraining order paperwork. As I pressed the pen to the final page, I realized I was shaking, not from weakness, but from fury that Derek still thought he could touch me. The building's security cameras confirmed what I already suspected. Derek had tried to enter with his spare key, but he wasn't alone. The footage showed another figure lingering in the lobby, keeping watch. Not Lena, not Vivian, someone else entirely. The next morning, Amaya and I stepped into the courtroom for the preliminary hearing. Derek sat across from me, smug in his tailored suit. Lena perched beside him in a dress too red, too eager. Vivian whispered furiously behind them. My stomach tightened, but Amaya's calm presence steadied me. When the judge called our case, Amaya rose. She began with the forged contract, sliding the original beside the analysis from a forensic handwriting expert. The conclusion was clear. The signature was not mine. Forgery, Amaya said evenly, her voice slicing through the air. Deliberate and calculated. Then came the paper trail. Transfers from Derek's LLC to Lena's account, memo lines coded as consulting, deposits staggered to mask the sums. Fraud wasn't speculation anymore. It was math. Ari's testimony sealed the room's attention. She recounted Derek's drunken boasts at a family dinner, how clever he was to leverage Sloane's clean name for cheap credit, how he could always count on her silence. The words came back to haunt him, this time not whispered over whiskey, but recorded in the court record. And then the unexpected turn arrived. The man I'd seen in the security footage came forward. He was one of Derek's former business associates, a man buried in debt Derek had left him holding. Quietly, he revealed he had been recording Derek for weeks, insurance against betrayal. In one clipped audio file, Derek's own voice bragged, "She'll never know I sold the apartment until it's too late. By then, it's already done." The courtroom hushed. Derek's face flushed red, then pale. Lena gripped his arm, nails digging into his suit sleeve, but even she couldn't hold his unraveling together. "You might believe he can talk his way out," Amaya said, turning toward the judge. "But the evidence speaks louder than spin. This isn't the story of a paranoid wife. This is the story of a husband who built his empire on lies, fraud, and betrayal." For once, Derek had no words. The judge's gavel fell with measured finality. "Pending trial, the residence remains under Mrs. Archer's possession. All assets remain frozen. No transfers authorized." My chest expanded with a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The apartment was safe, for now. Derek's claws had been pried back from at least one piece of my life. But victory was never clean. Outside the courtroom, Derek stormed toward me, his eyes wild. "This isn't over, Sloane," he hissed, his voice trembling with rage. "We're going to talk. Tonight. Alone." I met his glare without flinching, though inside my pulse drummed fast and hot. This was no longer just a legal battle. He wanted confrontation, one final strike. The courthouse lobby hummed with voices, a swirl of reporters, clerks, and litigants moving in chaotic streams. Derek pushed through them, his shoulders squared, his eyes burning with a fury I had seen many times but never so naked. He closed the distance between us until I could feel the heat of his breath. "You think you've won?" he snarled. "You haven't seen what I can really do." My hand tightened around the folder I carried. Before I could answer, 2 security guards intercepted, stepping between us. One raised a hand, the other spoke firmly. "Mr. Caldwell, step back." Derek shoved against them, shouting my name as if he could claw me back into submission by force alone. But then, the sharp voice of an officer cut through. "Restraining order in place. Sir, you're violating court orders." The sight of him being pulled back, wrists nearly cuffed, felt like watching the tide finally retreat. He wasn't untouchable anymore. His threats carried no weight against the paper shield of the law. Inside the courtroom, the weight of finality hung heavy. The jury sat attentive, the judge presiding with steady eyes. Amaya played the recording Derek's associate had surrendered. Derek's voice filled the room, smug and incriminating. "She'll never know I sold the apartment until it's too late. By then, it's already done." The jury's faces shifted. Some frowned, others exchanged quick looks. The judge leaned forward, his tone grave. "Forgery, fraud, conspiracy. These are not civil disputes alone. They are matters for criminal prosecution as well." I looked across the aisle. Derek's face had drained of color, his arrogance stripped bare. Lena sat beside him, eyes darting wildly, her polished nails tapping against the table as though she could scratch a way out. Vivian lowered her gaze, clutching her pearls, the silence around her louder than any defense she might have made, and in that stillness, I turned to Vivian. For so long, she had been another adversary, the matriarch who shielded Derek's sins to preserve her social throne. But when our eyes met, I felt no triumph, no venom. I hope you heal, I whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, because victory meant nothing if it chained me to the same cruelty that had poisoned them. The judge cleared his throat, preparing to render the civil ruling, my palms pressed flat against the table. Then, before the gavel could strike, my phone buzzed. I glanced down at the screen. An email notification from the bank. The subject line burned into me. Notice of federal investigation, Caldwell LLC. The final domino had fallen. Derek's greed hadn't just destroyed our marriage, it had triggered scrutiny from higher courts, from investigators who would peel back every layer of his fraud. The gavel dropped. Judgment in favor of Mrs. Archer. The marital residence remains in her possession. Compensation for damages, attorney fees, and restitution are granted. Mr. Caldwell is to remain under asset freeze pending further proceedings. The air left me in a rush. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I had won. In the weeks that followed, Derek's world unraveled completely. Federal investigators seized his files. Business partners severed ties. The once proud realtor was reduced to a man dodging subpoenas, his name smeared across the very papers he once courted. Lena vanished from the public eye, deleting her social media accounts, her red dresses and sharp smiles swallowed whole by silence. She had gambled on his ambition and lost. Vivian, who once ruled her circles with an iron fist wrapped in pearls, faded quietly. Friends stopped calling. Her luncheons emptied. The matriarch's reign ended not with scandalous shouts, but with the slow erosion of whispers she could no longer silence. For me, the noise settled into stillness. The apartment was mine, not just in name, but in truth. I redecorated not to erase memories, but to claim space. Each room carried scars, but also renewal. The law had given me back more than walls. It had given me my dignity. One evening, months later, I stood on the shoreline as waves curled against the sand. The wind lifted my hair, tangling it with salt and promise. I unclasped the silver bracelet my mother had given me, turning it in my hand before fastening it back around my wrist. It no longer felt like an anchor. It felt like a compass. I pulled out my phone, typed a message to Noah. "I'm okay." His reply came almost instantly. "I knew you would be." For a long time, I let the ocean speak. Its roar wasn't Derek's voice, or Lena's laugh, or Vivian's scorn. It was mine, rising steady, unbroken. This wasn't revenge. Revenge was too small, too fleeting. What I had gained was something greater, the ability to stand in my own name, unshaken, untethered. No one would ever write me out of my story again.